Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. Behind me you can see Mount Sinai, which is where Moses was said to be given the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue, the 10 important rules of Judaism, which also stem into Christianity and Islam as well. And today we're going to be thinking about those 10 Commandments, and we're going to explore what they really mean. And do we really understand what they mean? Or do we misinterpret those? And so today is going to be one of those sessions where you're going to think and maybe your own preconceived notions are going to be tested. It's still time to go and grab a pen and paper, and here is our cheesy intro music. Okay, well, welcome back. Hope you've got that pen and paper now. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you just to start by making a few notes about which 10 of the 10 commandments you already know. Now, let me give you a clue, because I'm nice like that. You'll generally know them starting as thou shalt not or do not, with regards to do not do something. So, see if you can get all 10 written down. They don't all start with do not or thou shalt not in the old English version, but it'd be interesting to see which ones you already know already. So pause this clip and let's get writing. Okay, it'd be fascinating to see how many of those that you actually knew, and we'll go through those during this session. So our title today is What Do the 10 Commandments Mean? And our learning objective is to consider what the 10 Commandments actually mean and if they're applicable for today. So they're still relevant for today's society. So our literary objective is to extract information from an audio-visual source through developing our listening skills. So there will be a media clip for you to watch and for you to extract some notes from as well. Our outcomes then during this lesson is good outcome will be if you can match the commandments up with relevant images. Great if you can explain the commandments and what they actually mean. And even better if you can evaluate if you think the 10 commandments actually need to change to fit in with our world today. So our literacy skill, as I said, is listening for meaning, and our SMSC skill is spiritual, for us to think about what we think and what we believe and why we do, and moral as well. So are these sets of rules still important for today? So you've got an idea what we're doing during today's session then. So there's there's going to be a media clip we're going to watch. There's some images you're going to look at. Then we'll look at an exam question, look at some more images, and that would really about conclude where we're up to during this lesson. So we've looked about Jewish beliefs about God, we've looked at Jewish beliefs about the Messiah, life, death and judgment, and then we are on the 10 commandments. We did the Jewish mitzvot last time. I've done that in a slightly different order. I put that before deliberately, and then we're going to look at the Tanakh and the Talmud as well next time. So let's start with this. I'd like you to access the link in the Google Drive. The description is below, and to find this file. This is the one which is the 10 commandments, and there's a series of questions for you to answer there. So what you're going to do is you're going to write the answers down. You can write them straight in your book, or you can print the sheet off if you've got a printer, and you need to watch the clip I'm about to show you. Pause it if you need to as you go, because it is quite a lengthy clip. It comes from the Prelude University. It's a very, very useful clip. It goes into a lot of depth, which is what you need for this topic at GCSE. So pin back your ears, download that worksheet, and I'll see you in about 20-25 minutes or so. So at least you don't have to listen to me that much today.
No document in world history so changed the world for the better as did the 10 Commandments. Western civilization, the civilization that developed universal human rights, created women's equality, ended slavery, created parliamentary democracy, among other unique achievements, would not have developed without them. The 10 Commandments are predicated on the belief that they were given by an authority higher than any man, any king, or any government. That's why the sentence preceding the Ten Commandments asserts the following: God spoke all these words. You see, if the Ten Commandments, as great as they are, were given by any human authority, then any person could say, who is this man Moses? Who is this king or queen? Who is this government to tell me how I should behave? Okay, so why is God indispensable to the Ten Commandments? What is the first of the Ten Commandments? It might seem like an odd question, but it's not. Jews and Christians give different answers. The reason is that what we know as the Ten Commandments is, in the original Hebrew, the 10 statements. And since the Hebrew is the original, we begin with the first statement, which all religions agree is, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. This statement is so important that none of the other commandments make sense without it. First, it asserts that God is giving these commandments, not Moses and not any other human being. Second, God is the one who delivered you from slavery. Again, no human being did this, not even Moses. Therefore, you have an obligation to me, God. And what is that obligation? That you live by the following 9 commandments. Thanks to the 10 commandments, mankind learned that what God wants is that we be good to our fellow human beings. Even the commandments concerning not having false gods and not carrying God's name in vain are ultimately about morality. Let's discuss the second commandment according to the oldest, that is the Jewish enumeration of the 10 commandments. In Christian tradition, it's the first commandment. The most common translation begins, you shall have no other gods before me. Because today we have as many false gods as the ancients did. And why is it the mother of all the other commandments? Because if we identify false gods and avoid worshiping them, we will eliminate one of the greatest barriers to a good world, false gods. So let's begin by defining a false god. The point of biblical monotheism is that there is only one God, and that only this God, the creator of the universe, who demands that we keep these 10 commandments, is to be worshipped. Why? First, because one God means one human race. Only if we all have the same creator or father, as it were, are we all brothers and sisters. Second, having the same parent also means that no person or group is intrinsically more valuable than any other. And third, one God means one moral standard for all people. If God declares murder wrong, it is wrong for everyone, and you can't go to another God for another moral standard. What is the worst sin? The worst sin is committing evil in God's name. How do we know? From the third commandment of the 10 commandments. This is the only one of the 10 commandments that states that God will not forgive a person who violates the commandment. What does the commandment say? It is most commonly translated as, do not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless, meaning will not forgive, whoever takes his name in vain. Most people understandably think that the commandment forbids saying God's name for no good reason. So something like, God, did I have a rough day at work today, violates the third commandment. But that interpretation presents a real problem. It would mean that whereas God could forgive the violation of any of the other commandments, dishonoring one's parents, stealing, adultery, or even committing murder, he would never forgive someone who said, God, did I have a rough day at work today? The Hebrew original does not say, do not take. It says, do not carry. The Hebrew literally reads, do not carry the name of the Lord thy God in vain. One of the most widely used new translations of the Bible, the New International Version, or NIV, uses the word misuse rather than the word take. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. This is much closer to the original's intent. What does it mean to carry or to misuse God's name? It means committing evil in God's name, and that God will not forgive. The fourth commandment reads, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns." Why is this so important? First, perhaps more than any other commandment, it elevated the human being. How so? For nearly all of human history, life consisted overwhelmingly of work. In effect, humans were beasts of burden. This commandment, and only this commandment, changed all that by insisting that people cease working 1 day out of 7. Second, more than any other commandment, the Sabbath day reminds people that they are meant to be free. The fifth of the 10 commandments reads, "Honor your father and your mother." This commandment is so important that it is one of the only commandments in the entire Bible that gives a reason for observing it, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Many people read that part of the fifth commandment as a reward. But while it may be regarded as a reward, the fact remains that it is a reason. If you build a society in which children honor their parents, your society will long survive. Yet neither the 10 Commandments nor the Bible elsewhere commands us to love our parents. This is particularly striking, given that the Bible commands us to love our neighbor, to love God, and to love the stranger. The Bible understands that there will always be individuals who, for whatever reason, do not love a parent. Therefore, it does not demand what may be psychologically or emotionally impossible, but it does demand that we show honor to our parents. And it makes this demand only with regard to parents. There is no one else who the Bible commands us to honor. You would think that of all the 10 Commandments, the one that needs the least explaining is the sixth, because it seems so clear. It is the one that the King James Bible, the most widely used English translation of the Bible, translates as, "Thou shalt not kill." Yet the truth is quite the opposite. This is probably the least well understood of the 10 Commandments. The reason is that the Hebrew original does not say, "do not kill," it says, "do not murder." Both Hebrew and English have 2 words for taking a life. One is kill, harag in Hebrew, and the other is murder, ratzach in Hebrew. The difference between the two is enormous. Kill means, 1, taking any life, whether of a human being or an animal. Murder can only mean one thing, the illegal or immoral taking of a human life. That's why we say, "I killed a mosquito," not "I murdered a mosquito." And that's why we would say the worker was accidentally killed, not the worker was accidentally murdered. Do not commit adultery. The prohibition on a married person having sexual relations with anyone except his or her spouse may be, for many people, the most consistently difficult of the 10 Commandments to observe. The reasons shouldn't be hard to guess. One is the enormous power of the sex drive. It can be very hard to keep in check for the entirety of one's marriage, especially when an attractive outsider makes him or herself sexually or romantically available. Another reason is the human desire to love and be loved. For normal people, there is no more powerful emotion than love. If one falls in love with someone while married, it takes great effort not to commit adultery with that person. And if we add in the unfortunate circumstance of a loveless marriage, adultery becomes even more difficult to resist. A good case can be made that the 8th commandment, "do not steal," is the one commandment that encompasses all the others. How does do not steal encompass the other commandments? Well, murder is the stealing of another person's life. Adultery is the stealing of another person's spouse. Coveting is the desire to steal what belongs to another person. Giving false testimony is stealing justice, and so on. This commandment is unique in another way. It is the only commandment that is completely open-ended. All the other commandments are specific. The fifth commandment, for example, states that it is our parents whom we should honor. The sixth commandment, prohibiting murder, is about taking the life of an innocent human being. The seventh commandment, prohibiting adultery, is also specific to a married person. Two unmarried people cannot commit adultery. But the commandment against stealing doesn't even hint at what it is we're forbidden to steal, which means that we cannot take anything that belongs to another person. Stealing a life, a person, a spouse, material property, intellectual property, a reputation, dignity, or trust. There is hardly any aspect of human life that is not harmed, sometimes irreparably so, by stealing. That is why it is fair to say that if everyone observed only one of the 10 commandments, observing the commandment, do not steal, would, all by itself, make a beautiful world. The ninth of the 10 commandments is, you shall not give false witness against your neighbor. This means two things. Do not lie when testifying in court, and do not lie, period. If people testify falsely in a courtroom, there can be no justice. And without even the hope of justice, there can be no civilization. The Hebrew Bible was so adamant on this subject that the punishment imposed on a witness who gave false testimony was the same as the punishment that would have been meted out to the accused had the false testimony been believed. In the case of a crime that would be punishable by death, therefore, the false witness was liable to be put to death. But the commandment is clearly concerned with truth generally, not only in a courtroom. In the 10 commandments, commandments 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the ones that prohibit acts of evil, murder, adultery, stealing, and perjury. And then there is one commandment that prohibits the thing that leads to murder, adultery, stealing, and perjury. Which one is it? It's the last of the 10. Do not covet anything that belongs to others, not their spouse, their house, their servants, their animals, or any of their property. In order to understand this commandment and its unique significance, the first thing to understand is that this is the only one of the 10 commandments that legislates thought. All the other commandments legislate behavior. In fact, of the 613 laws in the 5 books of Moses, virtually none prohibit thought. Why then does the 10 Commandments include a law that prohibits a thought? Because it is coveting that so often leads to evil. Or to put it another way, coveting is what leads to violating the preceding 4 commandments, the ones against murder, adultery, stealing, and perjury. Think about it. Why do people do those things? In most instances, it's because they covet something that belongs to another person. Obviously, that is the reason people steal. Thieves covet their victims' property. But it is also the reason for many murders, and coveting is obviously the reason for adultery, wanting the spouse of another person. As for perjury, or bearing false witness in the language of the 10 Commandments, that is done in order to cover up all these other crimes that are caused by coveting. I'm Dennis Prager.
Okay, I hope you managed to navigate that okay, and you got quite a bit of information from that. I personally find that a very challenging clip, because it really addresses some of the preconceptions that I've got about the Ten Commandments and makes me realise that maybe I didn't know them quite as well as I thought I would. So we said a good outcome would be to match up the commandments with relevant images. Well, we haven't really done that yet, but we said a great outcome would be if you could explain the commandments and what they actually mean. So we've done our media clip. Let's look at some images. So from the good old Brick Testament then, which of the Ten Commandments does this picture match? All you need to do is to either write the commandment down or the commandment number if you've got those. So pause this clip, have a think, and get that written down. I'll go through the answers at the end of this. Okay, here's the next one. Here's the next one. Okay, so let's just see what we've got. With the first one then, it's number 6, don't murder. For the second one, it's number 7, do not commit adultery. For the next one, number 3 that you've got, that is number 10, it's don't be jealous, don't covet. And the last one is about being a good neighbour. Those people are slaves. That's clearly not a happy neighbourly situation here. So that's number 9. Okay, so what we've done is we've covered our media clip and we've covered our first set of images. So we're going to look at some exam questions now. So we're going to look at a D question. Okay, this is an evaluation question. So it's the one that should be about 1.5 pages of written work. That's kind of the rough point of where you're going, and what I've got here is my suggestion of how you might approach the answer to this, but as I always say, there is more than one way to approach an exam question. So the question is this: keeping the Ten Commandments is the most important part of Judaism. Keeping the Ten Commandments is the most important part of Judaism. Discuss this statement showing that you've considered more than one point of view. You must refer to religion and belief in your answer. So the things that you're going to need to consider in this question is what other things are important in Judaism. Well, the main thing that we've already thought about is belief in God or the Messiah, Olam Haba, or even some Jewish festivals that we covered when we were looking at the Jewish Chronicles unit, or the idea of covenant. So we've covered an awful lot. So the question really is are the Ten Commandments the most important? So you're going to start with coming up with a reason why they're the most important. Then you're going to hopefully put a quote from the Judaism Shema or other quotes that you know. Now you've got a load of information about the Ten Commandments there, so that should be fairly straightforward today. Then you're going to explain that information, and then you're going to say how that information changes a Jewish person. So I always call that PEAK, point, evidence, explanation, and change. Then you're going to do an argument against, so another thing that might be important in Judaism that isn't keeping the Ten Commandments. Then you've got the rebuttal, which is basically a third point of view, a third argument, a third thing that you can throw in there. Then my opinion, but remember the examiner never really wants to know what your opinion is. They want to know that you can reach a reasoned conclusion. So in my opinion, the strongest argument is, that's always a nice word, nice phrase to use. In my opinion, the strongest argument is. And then finally, if everyone agreed with me, or if everyone agreed with the quote, what would happen? So that's your structure. Watch that again if you need to. I'm going to leave this on the screen. You've got about between 12 and 15 minutes. I suggest you use 12 minutes for it. And you need to use PEAK, point, evidence, explanation, and change for, against, and rebuttal if you can. But it's really important you get that evaluation in there as well. So set yourself a timer and see what you can do in 12 minutes. And why not photograph that and send that through to your teacher to look at as well. Okay, so with that done, this is how it's going to be marked. The first thing that you need to do is you need to identify, are there any quotes in there? If you can't find any quotes, the maximum you're going to score is between 7 to 9, and that's the uses and interprets some religious specialist language and or sources of wisdom and authority, so that's a band 3. If you've got quotes in there, then you're going to hopefully be getting above a 7 out of 15 all the way through to the top. Then what you're going to look at, is it a poor answer? And if it is, then that's a band 1. Is it a limited statement of more than one point of view? So you've done a for and against, maybe not a conclusion. That would put you at a band 2? Is it good, which is band 3, very good band 4, or excellent band 5? And you've also got use of religious language. So not only are you needing to look at quotes, you're needing to look at religious language. You look at the bottom paragraph of each of those levels boundaries. If it's poor, there's no use of religious language, that's going to be a band 1. If there's limited religious language, so a word like Tanakh or Ten Commandments, all of that would put you into a band 2. If you're using some religious terms and specialist language correctly, then that will put you in band 3. If it's used appropriately and with a bit of detail, that will be a band 4. And if it's used extensively, that will be a band 5. So give yourself a mark now and set yourself an EBI so you know what you need to do differently next time if you were to answer that question again. Okay, so let's just start to reach a conclusion. So we've said a good outcome would be if you can match the commandments up with relevant images, and we've done that, and hopefully you've done that really well. Great if you can explain the commandments and what they actually mean, and even better if you can evaluate if the commandments need to change to fit in with the world today. And that hopefully would kind of fit in within your evaluation question as well, potentially, but it's certainly one to think about. So let's do a little conclusion then for this session. Behind me are 10 images, and there are also the 10 Commandments, the Jewish version of the 10 Commandments. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is to pause this clip now and to try and identify which of the 10 Commandments match which of those images. So just make a few little notes, do a few little drawings if you want to. Don't spend too long on this because all I'm trying to do is to see if you can identify which of these images match which of those 10 commandments. I'm going through those answers in a moment with you. So pause the clip now and just see if you can identify that. So number 1 and number 2 goes to this image of God, famous one by Michelangelo. However, Jewish people would not have that because it's a graven image. Number 3 goes to this one, don't take the name of the Lord in vain. Number 4 goes to the deck chair, about having a day of rest. Number 5 goes to the two parents and the child. Wonder if that's an image some of you are familiar with. Definitely would never happen with my 7-year-old. Do not murder goes to the chalk outline of the man, or the woman, sorry, very sexist. Then you've got this image of a couple and another couple about committing adultery. Do not steal goes to the burglar. Do not bear false witness, I've got that as the lie. And lastly, do not covet. Love that picture. He's very jealous of his sister's mobile phone. So that's really where we're up to today. I'm going to leave you a little extension task if you wanted to. What you could do is you could draw a grid of 10, and then you can shrink down, write the commandment in at the top, draw a little picture, and then shrink down a bit of information about it. That would make it really nice and colourful. Obviously, only do that if you've got time to do that, but I think that would be necessarily a helpful thing for you to do, just to sort of pull things back together again. So take the commandment, write it down, shrink it into a panel, draw a little picture, and move on to the next one. See if you get all 10 done. Right, I'm going to leave it there today. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that you found that session helpful, and I'll see you next time. Take care, stay safe, wash your hands, God bless, and I'll see you soon.